Welcome to Fulfillment Unpacked, the show where we bring together 3PL operators and industry leaders to share real stories, practical lessons, and strategies for running a smarter, more fulfilling warehouse. I'm your host, Scott Howard, and today I'm joined by Bill Carlin, a 3PL founder and tech innovator with deep roots in the industry. Bill started as an e-commerce merchant, then co-founded Shipmate Fulfillment after seeing a need for a better 3PL experience. He now splits his time between running Shipmate and building Gracklify, which is an open source marketplace for 3PLs. Welcome to the podcast, Bill.
Thanks for having me.
To get us started, I thought I'd come up with the fun question of what's the weirdest thing you've ever shipped in your warehouse?
Yeah, so the weirdest thing we've ever shipped is actually toilet paper. Remember back in 2020 when the world was shut down and, you couldn't find toilet paper anywhere? Well, it just so happened that from, the previous e-commerce business, we had every SKU we ever imported still saved in the system. And one of those SKUs happened to be a 4-pack of toilet paper. Right. Even though we never sold it online, we had the SKU. It was already an Amazon system. It was already approved. So we were able to start selling 4 packs of toilet paper, some pretty nice money in those times because we already had the SKU and it was already approved. So, during that time, we were selling everything from, 4 packs to single rolls. It was crazy, the fact that we had 30 people just packing toilet paper all day.
Yeah, those are crazy times. I was one of those people who had to buy from Amazon because our local stores were all out.
Yeah, I mean, we used to turn the Amazon listing on for that, right? And we could only leave it on for about 3 minutes because you would get 10,000 orders in 3 minutes. I've never seen anything like it. If it ran for more than 10 minutes, there was no chance you would get the orders out the next day.
You started off as a merchant and you became a 3PL founder. Take us back. What was your experience as a merchant?
Yeah, so I actually started in wholesale before I went online, and we were selling to the big box stores like Sears, Kmart, all those guys that are not around or are shell their former self, right? And we kind of saw the pivot coming where everything was going online. So I thought to myself, let's take a couple of these items, let's take some of the better sellers, put them on Amazon and see how they do. Well, after a couple containers went through Vendor Central, you're like, okay, well, this is the new direction of business. All right, let's go all in on this. So started growing that side of the business, got to the point where we were selling, over $10 million a year on Amazon in revenue. And then, came down to the fact that we wanted to get down other marketplaces, right? And at the time, you couldn't use Amazon to fulfill your Walmart orders or your eBay orders or your Wayfair orders. So you had self-fulfillment, right? So at that time, we set up the whole packing op and everything like that and started fulfilling our own orders because we had an experience with a 3PL. So when we decided we were going to start, doing our own fulfillment, we started looking for 3PLs. And at the time, this is pre-peak. It was like a revolutionary thing. You went to the conference, you heard the words for the first time ever, right? And back in 2015. And, we weren't very happy with the experiences we were having with these 3PL providers. So like I said, we set everything up in-house, brought everything in-house, and eventually decided, well, why don't we sell this service? We're already doing it for ourselves. We're doing a good job. We're meeting the SLAs and, we have the employees for it. So let's sell the service. And, after that, we became very successful in the 3PL space and never looked back.
Oh, that's really cool. Seems like that is a common story that I've heard from different 3PLs. But what's interesting is there tends to be just a moment where that logistics is your path and that you're ready to scale beyond just the e-commerce. Was there a particular moment that you realized that logistics and being a 3PL was the way to go?
Well, I think, and this is a common story you'll hear all the time, is it just so happened to line up with what we do and what our business is, right? So, we have a large building that's been in the family since 1984, right? And well, what are you going to do with this big magical building if you're not doing wholesaling, right? So you got all this space, e-commerce for yourself only takes up a little tiny corner of it. What are you going to do with the building, right? And I think the story is very similar for a lot of 3PL owners where somebody was an importer or a wholesaler, or they were an e-commerce seller, right? And they get this big building and they don't need the whole thing, right? So rather than go out and find a tenant and, start subleasing the building that they own, they go into, the 3PL space because they have experience. They have decades of experience of moving freight, picking and packing. And, once you have those skills, they're pretty useful skills to a lot of people in the e-commerce industry.
When you started down this path, was there another moment where oh man, we took off a little bit more than we can chew? Running a 3PL isn't easy. Was there ever a moment that you were like, oh man, this was a little bit more than we knew we were signing up for?
Yeah, I mean, it happens, right? There's times where there's peaks, there's spikes, there's everything. And like, I want to harken back to those COVID days again, right? Because those were crazy times. And, around Christmas time, they were telling the UPS trucks, they were telling the FedEx trucks, you pick up 200 packages a day, and that's all you're allowed to pick up. So it became this challenge of how do you get your own parcels to the hubs, right? And how do you get them to accept those trucks, right? And, you had to play all kinds of games. Some people might have got a couple extra Christmas cards, you know,
Yeah.
and you had to make it work, right? Because at the same time, you had customers being down your door going, your orders are 5 days. It's 5 days. And at that time, you had the whole tracking nightmare from COVID where, the post office was 2 weeks behind. And the average consumer was unaware of this. So it was a lot of customer service. And it was a lot of handling different things. Meanwhile, you'd have order spikes like you've never seen before. And I think it was a really challenging moment in the 3PL space for everybody. And, you know, it's I think of that because it's the most extreme example of that, because like you get spikes, you
Yeah.
get problems. Sometimes you get backed up a day because Prime Day was bigger than what it was, or the week before Christmas is bigger than what it was. But that's the one where I'm like, yeah, I remember 5 days worth of packages sitting on the dock and post office delivering things 3 weeks late and blaming us.
It's interesting being in the 3PL world, just realizing how much of that passes through to the shipping and to the warehouses. Any disruption can cause some major issues, and any big fluctuation ends up being a lot of fun to deal with.
Well, see, the problem is it's not the fluctuation that's the problem, right? It's not the increased volume, it's the lack of communication. I mean this on both sides, whether you're a merchant or you're a warehouse, is it's important to have a strong line of communication. If you're not communicating, that's what leads to the problems with these spikes, right? If you just decide you're going to have a 4th of July sale and don't tell anybody, right? This is when the warehouse doesn't bring in some extra labor, doesn't set some overtime on the clock, and all of a sudden, you have an issue, right? And a
Yeah.
lot of times, if there's communication, there's ways to work through a lot of things, right? Maybe some orders are prioritized, some orders are deprioritized. Sometimes a warehouse can bring in some temp labor to kind of supplement here and there. Sometimes warehouses will open for additional hours, right? There's all different kinds of ways to make, a peak or a valley, work effectively within a warehouse, especially from a labor management standpoint. But it all starts with really good communication and, the teamwork between the merchant and the warehouse, because the warehouse is an extension of their team.
Previously, I was a marketer, and I worked with a lot of merchants, and sometimes the sales and the marketing would go much better than expected, but then would run into problems with trying to communicate that. Yeah, I definitely agree with that communication. There were definitely some moments when the merchant could have done much better at communicating what's going on and facilitating that conversation.
Right. And the conversation matters on the other side too. Like, let's say you're a 3PL and you do 4,000 orders a day, right? If one of your customers has a sale and they sell 2,000 orders more than what was expected, right? You now have 50% more capacity than you did the day before, right?
Yeah.
So now there's no real way you're going to accomplish it, right? So rather than,
Right.
kind of slide it under the table and that's when you pick up the phone and you call the merchant. You say, hey, I'm glad you guys had this great sale, and I'm glad everything's, fantastic, but what do you want me to take care of first? What's the highest priority? What's your customer service team going to do to kind of mitigate this, right? Because there's all kinds of things you can do, right? So like one of the tactics I've used in the past is we've actually fulfilled the West Coast orders first. So we're based in Philadelphia. So we'd prioritize those shipments that are going to take 5 days possibly to get there. And those orders that will get there the next day, we fulfilled those a day or two later, right? And nobody knows because, 3 days, it looks like 3 days since they placed the order and they still got it. Meanwhile, it bought us an extra day or two to get those orders out. And a lot of times if you communicate that with the customer, right, you guys can come to an agreement and understand, what's going on, especially if it's not Amazon orders that have those, strict cutoffs, right? As a Shopify seller, you can get pretty creative, right?
Yeah, that's a good solution.
Yeah, that's why I said it's all about communication and that cooperation piece, because, it all starts with that partnership, right? Because 3PL is a partnership at the end of the day, right? It's not the electric company, you want stuff to go in the box, but it's not that simple, right? There's the human component, right? There's all these relationships that are managed, right? And it's more complex. And then if you're a merchant, you also got the customer service, right? And having your customer service team or whoever's handling your customer service being aware of these dynamics as well, right? Like if you're going to be backed up at the warehouse, you probably want to let the customer service guy know, right? If you're going to have a
Yep.
sale, you probably want to have a preemptive email that says, hey, we had a big sale, shipping might be delayed a day or two, right?
I want to pivot a little bit to tapping into a little bit more your experience as the owner of a 3PL. Tell us about the hardest day you've ever had in the industry.
Well, last Christmas, we did a big project. Some of the Eagles players that, they get together, they put out a Christmas album every year, and that Christmas album, they donate the money to the kids in the city of Philadelphia. So what they did is they went out and they bought a present every single kid in the Philadelphia school system. Right? Talking, hundreds of thousands of presents, right?
Yeah,
And
that's a lot.
yeah, and we got this contract, and it got to the point where we were open 24 hours a day to make sure that kids got a good Christmas, make sure that all
Wow.
those packages got out. And it was one of the most rewarding times I've had as a 3PL owner, but it was also one of the hardest, right? Because somebody's got to be here to make sure that the third shift checks in on time, right?
Yeah.
So someone's got to drive in at 2 o'clock in the morning, get everybody switched over, and the whole 9 yards. So there was a point where I was coming into the office probably close to 18 hours a day to make sure that that project went off without a hitch for that week, and we were able to deliver those 200,000 plus presents.
How did you, as an individual, uh, pivot afterwards? Because giving up that time during the holidays can take a high personal toll.
Luckily, in the 3PL world, right, your hardest weeks are those week or two before Christmas. And then the week
Yeah.
after Christmas, everybody's returning everything. So if you're not into the returns department, there's not a whole lot going on, right? There's not a lot of order
Yeah.
activity 2-3 days after Christmas. It's nice that there's that little dip, and that little dip helps you kind of regenerate, kind of helps you rejuvenate back in the swing of things. But like I said, it's really, having a mission and understanding the cause that allows you to kind of overcome some of those personal hurdles and challenges.
I definitely could see how that would help, and understanding the why you're doing things to help drive that, because those holiday times in the e-commerce world can be rough. And I know personally, I've been burnt out before during the holidays, and I felt like I didn't really get much time with my family. I didn't feel like I kind of missed the holidays simply because I was so busy.
It's bittersweet because on one hand, it's very difficult to take these moments that you're supposed to be sharing with your family and all the holiday things and compartmentalizing that for some time. But on the other hand,
Yeah.
it's also the biggest opportunity you have as a brand, as a warehousing company, right? Right. And especially in the 3PL world. In January, that's when you find out whether 3PLs sink or swim, right? That's when people are
Yeah.
saying, hey, I need 3PL recommendations. My guys were backed up 4 days, right? Or
Yeah.
there's people on LinkedIn doing the exact opposite. Oh, my guys are so great. They got all the orders out. And the thing is, you hear it in January. You hear it every year. And I think that's the big one, is just being locked in during those times and understanding that like it's part of it's part of this industry.
As your experience of running a 3PL and your journey from going from merchant to a 3PL owner, what's a belief that you held early on that turned out to be dead wrong? And how did you discover it? And what did you do to unlearn that to be able to move forward?
One of the things that I rolled out way back in like 2017 was all-in-one pricing. You see it now with like the Bobs and the Monks and all the guys in the space where, they quote one price and includes the shipping, and includes the box, and includes blah, 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 blah for the merchant. And I thought merchants wanted this simplicity, right? But what we found was we couldn't really sell that. What they wanted was, itemized list of what every charge was, and understanding where every dime of that fulfillment process is, right? Like, why is it,
Right.
why is the number this, right? And help me understand it. And that was something that like really blew my mind, was the idea that like, I thought merchants thought like me, like, I just want to know I'm paying $9. I want to plug that into a chart. I want to know this profitability, right? Not,
Right.
hey, I want to help me understand where these costs come from and how I, determine that each one of these line items account to this particular order. So what I found really interesting when I started versus where I am now is the complexity of 3PL pricing, right? Rather than pricing getting simpler over time, pricing has actually gotten more and more complicated as more and more nuances are involved. More and more people want to see cost breakdown, right? People want to compare your pick fee versus somebody else's pick fee, right? And this like
Right.
granularization of the cost structure. And something I've seen more and more over time, because, we're doing the Racklify thing now, we're helping people find 3PLs, is I've been seeing a lot of differentiation in, pick fees and pack fees, right? And I've seen it where it
Right.
can go from 1 fee to 4 fees to put the thing in the box and send it down the line. But over time, like I said, I've seen more of this transition away from simplicity and more towards like highly nuanced, highly targeted pricing with every single little line item and every single piece of labor accounted for when it comes to 3PL pricing.
In my mind, that comes down a lot to trust and then also just transparency.
Yeah.
Where because there are so many transactions that can occur, and also because it is a complex thing, like the warehousing and the storage, the shipping, it's complex. And a lot of merchants seem to struggle to comprehend the complexity of what it takes to get a package out the door and what it takes to get a package to the customer. What I've seen is it tends to be a factor of trust and a factor of the 3PLs tend to be a very large expense for merchants.
Yeah.
And so when they're looking at how do we increase margin, they're first going to take a look at the 3PL and make sure, hey, are we being overcharged? And either they'll understand the complexity and they'll see that as an opportunity to negotiate, or they'll see that complexity and be like, oh man, I'm getting nickel and dime. Is there a way for me to maybe decrease some of these? Or there's a whole variety of ways that it can be taken. That it's interesting that the industry hasn't been able to simplify as much as you would expect. Just kind of like coming in from the outside, you'd assume it's a lot more simple, but it ends up being incredibly complex.
Yeah, well, I mean, 3PL billing is the biggest issue right now in the 3PL world. And you got 45,000 different startups right now trying to solve it. And, it's because 3PLs bill all so differently. And it's hard to uniformize that, right? If that's a word.
Right.
And, it's hard to get that uniformity. And it's hard to build a one size fits all, solution that hooks up to 15,000 different WMSs and 45 different TMSs and captures all the data and the storage data and the outbound data. And, it's a big challenge. And I think that that's one of the things that I think most people in the 3PL world are very much aware of, the difficulty when it comes to actually tracking all these things and billing all these things. And then, like you said, the merchants want this trust factor. But what I find is a lot of times merchants have trouble reading the bills because the bills are just this like compiled spreadsheet ran through some 3 different systems that the 3PL has like integrated in the back end with some like random middleware software. And, it'd be nice if there was more uniformity in the market, but this is one of the challenges that I think is, really being tackled now with AI and all these things. You finally have startups that are beginning to kind of at least figure some of this out where, when we started off, we were billing with, a sheet of paper, right? And then eventually, you hook up a software program to your WMS, and now you can calculate for storage and shipping, but you can't calculate for labor. So now you have the labor spreadsheets, right? And then over time, you build on a piece of software that calculates the labor in a third-party app, and that third-party app is now tied to your thing. But I just think it's this is the next big thing that I think is going to be solved in 3PL, and I'm really excited for that because I think there's a lot of companies out there that have a good chance of fixing it.
So switching gears a little bit, you've said in previous conversations that the biggest thing you want other operators to know is that they aren't alone, even if it feels that way. Why do many 3PLs feel isolated and like they're on an island?
Yeah, well, I think the problem is we're all selling perfection, right? We're all selling 99.9% on-time fulfillment. We're all selling 99.9998% accuracy. It's the way you market and sell yourself is on this perfection, reliability, dependability, right? Problems and challenges come up all the time in logistics because there's so many different people handling these goods from the time they go down the assembly line to the time they get in your business building.
Right.
And I think a lot of times 3PL owners are afraid to admit that hey, I have, some challenges in this area, or I need some suggestions on how to better do this. And what I've found is that there's a lot of community in the space. A lot of people are willing to give advice, help out, and suggest people and software and things that can help you out if you just ask. But I think a lot of people are afraid to ask. But I want everybody to know that you're not alone, right? That big shiny company down the street also has empty space in one or two of their buildings, right?
Right.
The guy that has 99.999% accuracy on his website also isn't mentioning the guy that brought in the mislabeled stuff the one time and then yelled at them for 2 weeks because it was mislabeled. It didn't get out on them, right? Like
Yeah.
everybody is experiencing these things, and I've heard stories from companies, big, small, companies that are, you know, big companies, and everybody is having, some sort of challenges, some sort of adversity at different points in time. And, you're not alone.
So as an operator, someone who's in the industry, what's the best way to start being more open and building those connections that you can then rely on other people?
Go somewhere, meet somebody who does what you do, maybe a little different, maybe in a different area in the country, right? And talk. Make some friends, meet some people that are in the software industry, meet some people that are in the trucking industry, right? People that have these relationships and have been doing different things and just make friends, right? It's like kindergarten again, right? Like you got to get out there. You got to
Right.
say, hello, my name is Bill and I do shipmate fulfillment and I run Racklify and I do these different things. What do you do? Oh, that's cool. Tell me more about that. I'm interested in how you guys are tackling this problem or how you guys are, doing that. Or do you have a software recommendation for that? That sounds really cool. Give me that guy's card, right? And it's just as organic as making schoolyard friends, right? And I think people think there has to be a motive, right? Like I have to want to talk to this guy because we're going to do business or we're going to do something where sometimes it can
Right.
just be, hey man, you're doing something cool. If you got 15 minutes this afternoon, I'd love to hear about it, right? Or, hey, we're at this trade show. I see you also do fulfillment. What kind of fulfillment do you guys do? Oh, that's awesome, right? And sparking up a conversation and genuinely having interest in what each other are doing. And I think that's a really good way to start getting out of the shell and finding others that you can turn to when there is a problem, when you need some advice and you need somebody that's been there, right?
Yeah, I've gone to several conferences that are industry conferences, and I'm sitting there looking around and I'm meeting people, and I have a hard time finding or meeting any 3PL owners.
Yeah.
It seems like in the industry at these events, there's a large lack of individual warehouses or operators. And to me, that feels like a missed opportunity. And so why do you think, what do you think is the number one reason besides feeling a little nervous to open up and feeling like you're giving away secrets to competitors? What, what, what holds people back from going to these opportunities to network?
To be honest with you, I think it has to do with a lot of personality types, right? So the guys that like to get into a spreadsheet and move inventory around, they're usually, your stereotypical spreadsheet guys, right? They're
Right.
operations guys. They're not your sales and marketing guy, right? It's very rare that the sales and marketing guy happens to run a 3PL, right? Like it's
Right.
usually, the guy that's been booking freight for 35 years or the guy that's like been managing inventories for his or companies for years, right? Like it's usually somebody that's more data driven, more analytical, right? And because of that, one of two things, A, they're not as social as like your type A salesman, the kind of guy that's like running your trade show booth, or B, they're just busy, right? Like people running 3PLs are busy, right? They're putting in
Yeah.
overtime, they're managing, multiple shifts of work. Sometimes they're coming in on Saturdays. And they might not just have the time to go pick up, leave their building for a week, go to some conference in Las Vegas, right? And,
Right.
it might be a missed opportunity, but, there's an opportunity cost as well, right? So I think that's a big part of this because in order to go out to a conference or go on to like a, networking event or to take even a meeting with a random guy who's in your inbox, right? You have to give up some of your time. And if most of your time is spent actually operating, doing the work,
Yeah.
it's kind of difficult, right? Like I'm lucky that I have a co-founder, right? Can pick up some of this slack so I can go to some of these events. I can take the random meeting at 3 o'clock and say, hey, you deal with the trucks that hour. I got a phone call, right? And
Yeah.
that's not true for everybody. There's a lot of people that are the linchpin in their organization because they are the owner. They are the person that sets the and I think that's actually the bigger challenge than even like, the personality analytical type issue.
Right. So was there a moment where being open and networking and uh, sharing with the community, there a moment that this made a difference in your life?
I went to a warehouse. So I noticed when the bins were empty, you know what they were doing? They were turning them upside down.
Oh, interesting.
What does it mean when the bin is upside down? It means it's empty. It means the employee can come over, grab any empty bin, know that it's upside down, fill it, and put it back on the shelf without sliding every bin out and looking at it to see if there's a unit stuck at the bottom. And it was just like one of these things where I was like, that's a really good idea that like, you're turning these bins upside down. He's like, yeah, we've been doing this for years this way. And it's easy because, we can see right away that gets a 0 in the cycle count. We don't even have to look at the bin. And like, it saves hours during a cycle count to just be able to go, yeah, that bin's a 0. Yep, that bin's a 0. Don't even touch it. It's upside down. Yeah, but it's like I said, you go somewhere and you maybe like the way they position the carts, right? Maybe you like the way that their conveyor belt drops off things at the end, right? And these are things that are not like trade secrets where like, oh man, somebody found out that I turned my bins upside down, and somebody found out that I like to put my cart at this angle. Like,
Yeah.
it's where, oh, this is a better type of pick cart for this kind of item, right? Like these little
Right.
tiny observations and these kind of things come up in conversation all the time if you're just having a chat, right?
You visited these other 3PL warehouses. What led to that? Was it you just asking, hey, I would love to come see your operation? Like, is there a time I can visit? Or was it something more natural?
It's more of a natural type of thing where, you have people that you're friends with that you talk to at all the conferences and and then when you're in town, you swing by, right? Like, hey, I'm in
Right.
town. You want to get
Okay.
lunch? Hey, I'm seeing you in 2 years. Yeah, and sometimes you go by the office, sometimes you go by the warehouse, right? And it's like I said, you'd be amazed how many people are collaborative in this industry. And a lot of people think of it as a super cutthroat, like, crazy industry, but it's really a warm, inviting, collaborative industry when you get down to the brass tacks.
Yeah. Yeah. I wouldn't have expected that quite as much. It seems like it's been hard to network and in particular just find the people that are fun to network with and jive with. So that's really cool that you've been able to go down that route when it seems like many just don't even try.
I'm all about being open and being authentic, right? And I think they're
Yeah.
really important characteristics, whether you're running a 3PL, whether you're running a tech company, regardless of what you're doing. If you put your best self forward, right, and you're honest and you're authentic in the things you do, people reciprocate that in it, right? It's having genuine, meaningful interactions with people over time, right? This doesn't happen
Right.
overnight. This is 10 years. In 10 years, I've probably seen 1 to 2 warehouses a year, right? It's not that large of a number when you stretch it over the fact that I've been doing this for almost 12 years now.
Shifting gears a little bit, I want to dive into a little bit more about your experience as being both a founder and operator, and how's that shaped your leadership style?
A lot of times you're the one leading, and a lot of times you lead by doing because at the end of the day, the buck stops with you, right? When you're the
Yeah.
founder and you're the owner, at the end of the day, all the responsibilities on your plate. For me, that's a really key part of my leadership style is having people know that if they need something, if there's an issue, if there's a spike, I'm going to be right there with them. If they need training, I will personally take time out of my day to train my employees. I don't rely on, the whole totem pole because at the end of the day, like I said, the buck stops with me, which means if somebody's not trained, it's my fault. It's not the guy who's training who's fault. And I think if
Yeah.
you're a founder and you're an owner, it's easier to have that mindset than if you're just like an operator.
Look ahead 5 years. What is something that everyone will wish that they paid attention to in the 3PL industry that most are ignoring now?
I think a lot of people are going to look back at these early onset of AI and how it impacted sales. And I think a lot of organizations are at different points when it comes to AI. We're not at the point yet where AI can run your inventory and your warehouse, right? You can see the robots at the conferences and they're not fully there, but they're getting there. But right now,
Right.
anybody that operates a warehouse, if they're not using AI to automate sales process, automate outreach, help them write better customer service emails, right? Getting
Yeah.
ahead and being an early adopter on this trend rather than a late mover, I think is going to be the thing that kind of crowns the next big group of 3PLs that comes up in this space.
That's a big wave that is already here that a lot of us are trying to figure out how will it impact everything.
We're already using this for a lot of different things, such as, customer service being the big one. But it's just
Yeah.
a matter of time till it's used all over. My favorite is customer service because I can write what I mean and then I can have it say kindly and professional.
Yep, exactly. Done that many times myself. I'm like, I feel like this is maybe a little not nice.
Yeah.
Then make it nice for me. Or vice versa. Sometimes a little too nice. I'm like, make this a little bit more stern. What's your favorite logistics and or leadership book?
Smart Pricing by John Zane. A lot of people just
Right.
pull a number that feels good out of the air, or they just look at what their competition is doing, and that's their whole strategy. But there's a lot of different mathematical formulas and things you can use to help you better tune that pricing to optimize for profit. Because at the end of the day, profit is a formula, right? So you can plug in a bunch of variables and you can change some of those variables and you can see how that big P moves. So his book's really good if you want to get into the nuts and bolts of how to price things. I think it's one of the most impactful things that I've read, and it's a book that I use every day.
What's the worst advice you hear founders of new 3PLs? What's the worst advice that you hear them getting?
Say yes to everything. So what I find is if a 3PL is saying yes to too many companies, what happens is they bring on a lot of smaller clients that require the same amount of customer service and the same amount of upkeep as larger clients. And a lot of new 3PLs don't understand this. And what I'm saying is not to not take on new and upstart companies. What I'm saying is don't have your entire business be you saying yes to every lead that comes in your door, right? You want to make
Right.
sure that they fit what you do, right? You want to make sure that, they're going to grow with you. They're going to help scale your business. You really want to sit down and go, does this merchant fit like what I'm looking for? Is it somebody we can service? And is it worth the time that we have to put in to manage this account? But you don't want to get to the point where your business is built on the backs of 50 different companies that require account management and don't really move any volume.
Give me one opinion that you have about 3PL or logistics that most people in the industry are going to disagree with you. Why do you think they're wrong? And go ahead and take your shot at it.
I think we need to be more honest. I think that's the big one, is the amount of times that we've delayed. And I know if we're doing it, there's people doing it worse. Contacting a customer when something is wrong, or we can't find something, or something's wrong. Right. When we could have just been transparent from the get-go. There's small things to be dishonest about where it's like, hey, we can't find this thing. We're going to give ourselves 24 hours to find it. And then there's things like, hey, your billing is going up for X reason when it doesn't really need to go up. It's a profitable account. You're just making more margin, right? There's no real justification for this, right? Or you're bringing a customer on, you're saying you know how to do something and you've never done it, right? Like it's like get the business.
Yeah.
Bring them in. We'll figure it out. We'll deal with serial numbers from the first time ever. Oh, we don't know how to lot track, but we'll lot track, right? Just being more honest and being more transparent is a really big thing because, like I said earlier, I think a lot of 3PLs are really image conscious and a lot of them need the business. So they say yes to a lot of things. And a lot of times, we'll skirt things by. And I think it would be better if the whole industry was more honest, more open, and more transparent, especially when dealing with merchants.
All right. One last question to wrap up this episode. One day you'll hang it up and leave this industry behind. What do you want people to remember about you that isn't on your LinkedIn profile?
So I hope they remember something that I've impacted, right? Whether it's a brand I've impacted whether it's a 3PL we've impacted via Racklify, whether it's I've exited at some point, some big company swallowed something up, right? But I hope somebody remembers something that I did, because I'm a big person that I don't need the recognition. I don't need the direct claim to fame for it, but I want to know that I made the impact. And if somebody remembers something I did, or they are fond of something that I was a small part of, for me, that's really impactful.
Well, Bill, I want to thank you for joining the Fulfillment Unpacked podcast. Before we end, how can listeners connect with you?
Yeah, so you can connect with me. I'm very active on LinkedIn. You can find me under William Carlin. You can also reach out to me via email, bill@racklify.com.
Well, thanks for listening to Fulfillment Unpacked. Every episode, we're all about bringing 3PL operators and industry leaders to share real stories, practical lessons, and strategies that help you run a smarter, more fulfilling warehouse. Keep learning, keep growing, and we'll see you next time.